She's making their way back. Leah, when they reach you, you wave. There's only one Leah up there. You burst in and say, computers. Hi, computer. How are they getting there? How are the sheets going? Okay, let me begin for lack of time. Bye, phones. Okay, for lack of time. This Shiur Klali, 6th of Tevet 5784, is dedicated by Deborah and Philip Levin and family in honor of the birthday of our current student, Beth! Betty is 19. 18! 18. שמונה עשרה לחופה? Happy birthday. We are sadly coming towards the are you comfortable there, Maya? On the floor? Are you on the floor? Are you on the floor? Oh, you're on a chair. Looking for a different subject as we're coming slowly towards the end of Sefer Bereshit once again. And a subject that's been very prominent, certainly in my shiurim over the last few weeks, but is actually very practical in this parsha. We have this meeting between Yosef and his brothers. Many different interpretations of what this meeting really was. Whether it was really full of happiness or whether there was an element of, anger. But certainly in the immediate aftermath of Yosef revealing himself to his brothers, there's obviously an enormous feeling of guilt on the side of the brothers. The last time they saw him, they had thrown him into a hole. And look at the psukim, because these are the psukim we're going to deal with here. A really brilliant essay here by Rabbi Yoni Grossman, followed by a wonderful word by Rabbi Sachs with an enormous amount to learn here. Come close, come to me. Vayigash, when they came close, Vayomer ani Yosef achichem, I am Yosef your brother, asher machartem oti mitzrayma, the one you sold to the Egyptians, or to Egypt. Sorry, Rabbeinu. Ve'ata al te'atzvu. Now, interesting, right? Because he immediately says, the one you sold me. But then he says, al te'atzvu, do not be saddened, do not be disheartened. Ve'al yichar be'enechem, and do not be upset. Ki machartem otim hena, that you sold me here. Ki lemechya shelachani elokim lifnechem. What a complex sentence. because God sent me to sustain you. On the one hand, Hashem machartem oti, you sold me, but do not be upset because God wanted me to be here to sustain you. Ki zeh shnatayim hara'av b'kerev ha'aretz, there's already been 2 years of famine in the land. V'od 5 shanim asher ein 5 lekaseh, and there is destined to be another 5 years. There wasn't, in fact, there was destined to be another 5 years. V'yishlacheni Elokim lifnechem lasum lachem she'erit ba'aretz. God sent me here to keep you alive. Lachayot lachem lifleita gedolah. So he concludes, Va'atem, and therefore, lo atem shalachtem oti hena. You didn't send me here, ki ha'elokim. God did. V'yisimeni la'av leFaro, he has made me a patron of Pharaoh's. U'la'adon b'chol beito, he's made me a master over all his house. U'moshel b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and a ruler over all of Egypt. That's an incredible comment. Yosef hasn't been home for 22 years. He was sold by his brothers. His brothers are distraught. And he says, even though you sold me, it was God's will. He sent me here to feed you. Have a look at Rabbi Yonatan Grossman. He lives in Al Yeshuv. He's actually a professor of Tanakh at Bar Ilan, a very important guy to me to know. He's written a book, a very thick book called Yosef, and this is just a couple of pages inside the book, which I've been going through over Shabbat for the last few weeks. ניכר שיוסף רואה את התפקיד שהטילה עליו ההשגחה למען אחרים, למען אחיו ולמען אביו. Yosef sees this entire episode as being divine providence, something that God has given him a job to look after his brothers and his father. He's not happy just that God has brought him from darkness to light. This personal redemption has a mission. And he was sent for that mission. We see his speeches in Yosef Yosef suggests to his brothers to totally detach themselves from any feeling of guilt because of them selling him, even though he brings it up. We could be even more extreme. Yosef he relieves them of their responsibility for what they have done to him. Incredible action, almost superhuman. He relieves them of everything that he's gone through. At the end, he will give a more complex summary. But on this climax, where the story is reaching its climax, he is giving his ethical, theological stand on everything that has happened so far. Yosef eineno mistapek belomar le'echav shehu mochel lahem al pekiatam bo. Yosef is not prepared just to say that he forgives them for what they have done. You should not be upset for what you have done to me. He is directly relating to this massive guilt that the brothers have, and he's telling them, you should not be guilty for what you did. It was all for the good. Why does Yosef do this? Why does he relieve them of their responsibility? What is the basis of where's he coming from? He can base his suggestion adanim musariyim on an ethical base, or adanim theologim, or on a theological base. שבמקרה זה יוסף כנראה חושב ביניהם, and יוסף connects between them. האדנים המוסריים, the ethical base, עולים מתוך רצף הסיפור כולו. This comes up in the story repeatedly. יוסף אפילו לא צריך להזכיר זאת, he doesn't even have to mention it בפירוש. ירידת האחים השנייה למצרים בשל דאגתם לשמעון כבר הוכיחם שהם שינוי טעמם. Now, there's something else going on here which I will refer to again at the end of the Shiur, but they've gone through a certain talich. It relates indirectly, but I relate to it directly in the end as well, of the ET question that I brought up last time, was why didn't Yosef call home? Why didn't he call home all of these years? Keep that in the back of your mind. I want to come back to it right at the end. But at this stage, they have been through an incredible process. Remember, the story started with the brothers throwing a brother into a pit, relieving themselves of any responsibility they had towards him, and leaving him there to die. That's how the story began. What has happened in the last two parshas is quite unbelievable. Number one, they have come back for Shimon. They've risked their lives to come back from Shimon, who's been in jail for a parsha. All of this week he's been in jail. All the time they went back to Yaakov to tell the story. Shimon stayed in Egypt in jail. And they came back for Shimon. But that's only one level. They risked their lives for their brother, who is a son of Leah, who's their brother. But just now, they're prepared to risk their lives for Binyamin, who's a son of Rachel. This is an absolute turnaround from what happened with Yosef, the other son of Rachel, who they abandoned and threw into a hole. What a turnaround in the perception of the brothers, that they are now prepared to be slaves. Yehuda, who was the one who wanted to sell Yosef, is now the one who is prepared to sell himself to protect Binyamin. Just see what he says here. They did not leave Shimon in Mitzrayim, they came back. Omnam ka'amor le'el, Shimon hu ben Leah. So Shimon, as we said before, is the son of Leah. Kach שמדובר בתיקון קל, אולם האחים דרך נסיגם יהודה הוכיחו שהם מוכנים לנסוע את נפשם גם עבור בנה השעיר של רחל. But now they've got a further stage, and they're prepared to give themselves up for the son of Rachel. So there's an ethical reason why Yosef should forgive them, because they have done teshuvah, they've repented, they are behaving totally differently to how they have behaved in the past. יכולים האחים להסתכל זה לזה בעיניים, the brothers can look each other in the eye, ולומד בכנות שהם תיקנו את דרכיהם. That they have corrected something. It's not often in life when we do something wrong that we're given a chance to change it. That we're put into almost, like the Rambam says in Hilchot Tshuva, you're put in almost the exact same situation and you're able to turn it round and act differently. And here it's a worse situation because they were directly going to suffer from the problems of Shimon and the problems of Binyamin, and here they have put their names, their lives on the line to protect their brothers. So from an ethical front, he could certainly forgive them. They can even look Yaakov in the face and say, look how we were prepared to defend and look after Binyamin. ובמיוחד למען אביו של בנימין, לפיכך יש בעשה שאחים לא יעשו ביו לעשן התנקותו עליהם. So they shouldn't be upset because of what they did in the past, because they have rectified it ethically to a degree. Next paragraph, slightly there. What is the theological base of Yosef's comment? On another reason you should be relieved of your sadness, your guilty conscience, it's clear that God sent me. There was a plan here. There was a Seder that God sent me here. Had I not been here, you would be starving in Israel. You wouldn't be able to come down to Egypt to be sustained by the prime minister. You wouldn't know who the prime minister was. Why would he sustain you? Because the final result, this is such an interesting comment. What is an event defined by? The process or the end result? The totza'ah, the result here is a good totza'ah. It saves our people. And Yosef is saying that since the end result is good, it justifies everything that came before it. I want to digress for a minute and explain something to you. Everyone in the room has heard of the story of David and Bathsheba, correct? Scandals, as they call them in French. Scandals. David and Bathsheba. Now the Gemara, the Pasuk says in Shmuel Bet, Perek Aleph, Bet, Yud Aleph, that David sinned. The Navi says that David sinned. God says that David sinned. So answer me this: the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Nun Hey says that anyone who suggests that David sins is mistaken. What does that mean? You read these prakim in Tanakh. David says he sinned. God says he sinned. The Navi says he sinned. And then the Gemara says anyone who says that David sins is mistaken. I have a suggestion. I want to qualify my suggestion by saying there are a number of comments like that in that page, and my answer only works with David. If you could imagine a graph, what I believe is that the Tanakh is discussing an event. Just come in quickly. Just come straight in. That the Tanakh is discussing the event when it happened. Listen carefully. And the Gemara is discussing an event at the end of David's life. Meaning, if you can imagine a graph, okay, with David's life on the graph, ups and downs on a time scale. So when David is with Bathsheba, he's on an absolute low. After that low, David is elevated and he ends his life on a high. When the Gemara says, it's exactly what Rabbi Grossman is saying here, or what Yosef is saying according to Rabbi Grossman. When the Gemara looks at David's life, it's looking at David's life at the end. At the end, he was on a high, and the end is what counts. When the Tanakh is looking at David, it's looking at David when it actually happened. When it actually happened, he sinned. What do I mean? If, for example, I was a very exploring and adventurous and naughty young person, and now I'm somewhere else, you understand that where I am now has everything to do with where I came from. If you take any element of my life away, I will not be here. If you cut a part of the graph off, you can't get to the next part of the graph. So in the entirety of David HaMelech's life, even though at a specific stage he sinned, because he turned it around, that sin takes on an entirely different proportion at the end of his life, because it becomes part of the total makeup of David. If you look at David when he did it, it was a sin. If you look at it at the end of his life, it's part of the greatness of who David is. That's what I believe that he is suggesting that Yosef is saying to the brothers. When you sold me, that was a bad act. But look how it ended. It ended with me here. And I couldn't be here if you didn't sell me. It wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have gone. If I hadn't gone through everything I went through, I would not be in the position I'm in. Every single part of this puzzle was critical to me. It's so true about us as well, ladies. We go through so many things in our life, and you sometimes have this, it's a crime, I think. You have Balei Teshuvah. They become very religious, and then they want to deny their past. It's a mistake. They can't deny their past because their past is part of their present. They cannot be who they are if they deny their past. Their past makes them who they are. It's a mistake. Even to regret is a mistake at the end, because by the end it's part of a new person. And if you take that element out of the person ceases to exist. That's what Rabbi Grossman is saying here. מאחר שתוצאות, full lines from the bottom, מאחר שתוצאות האלימות שהפעילו האחים כלפי יוסף התגלגלו לטובה. It's a very complex suggestion, but because the end result worked out for the better, ומאחר שתוצאות מעשיהם התבררה כחיובית, and because the result was ultimately positive, הם אינם צריכים להצל או מה שעשו, they should not be upset about what they did. This is not to be understood automatically. This is not a presumption that is automatically acceptable to everyone. But Yosef repeatedly uses this theme. What you did was okay because look where we got to. Yafet Dovev Thomas man, this is a non-Jewish person. He puts the following words in his mouth. Go back to my example, right? Before you have the result, you cannot judge the event because you don't know how it's going to end up. Why do we call Seder night Seder night? Why is it called Seder? Because the whole point of the evening is to see the entire process as it happened. That it got somewhere, it reached somewhere. When you're in the middle of it, you can't understand. You cannot judge a situation when you're in the middle, but you can when you get to the end because then you have a complete perspective. Before we have the result, all we can see in front of it is a particular part of the puzzle. And it could even look to be a bad part. But once we get to the result, then we look at the judgment overall. The difference between what they wanted originally to do to Yosef and what happened in reality, he changes a word here. Yosef potech she'achim einam tzrichim liyot atzuvim ki machartem. He says, you sold me. Ach miyad, but straight away he changes the verb. Ki lemichya shelachnani, but God sent me here to sustain me. Me'ata gam biyachas la'achim lo yameh Yosef shehem machru oto ela shehem keshlichei ha'ashgacha. Yosef is now saying something that's very complex. He's saying, you didn't sell me, but you are God's messengers to make sure what happened. Go down to the third paragraph. It says, Ruach Domeh Olam Mechtava Shel Reb Tzadok HaKohen Milublim. Reb Tzadok HaKohen is a very, very ingenious Hasidic leader who came from Kos, but went in a different way. He came from Ishbitz, really, the Ishbitz line of Hasidut. So he says as follows, this is mind-blowing Hasidic philosophy, which is not accepted by most people. Even though a person is expected to weigh up his actions, when we weigh up our actions, we have full bechira. Listen very, very carefully. This you could spend the entire evening and every other Monday evening for the rest of your lives discussing. When I'm making a decision in the middle of an action, I have absolute bechira. But once the action is done, then I look at it as the fulfillment of God's will. I have bechira in the process of the action, but the result is what God wants. A lot of time we have to spend on that. Even though within Chassidus, this is understood to be extreme. It seems to be that we're relieving a person of their responsibilities. At the time of the action, you had choice, but what happened is what God wanted to happen. So next paragraph. Yosef wants to retell the story with a different perspective. Physical abuse, but it's a new story. Just depends how you tell it. We can tell the story as we have been telling it for a number of weeks. The Yosef was bullied, oppressed, thrown into a hole, and then sold. Or we can look at the story as being Yosef was sent to save his brothers and his father. It all has to do with our perspective. Over the page, I don't want to run out of time. I've got a bit more time, don't have to go over the page. Okay. I've got time. כפי שכבר עלה לאורך הסיפור, האחים אכן תרגלו שוב ושוב את טכניקת הסיפור המקודשת של המורה. שוב ושוב נעצרו האחים מול גורמים שונים ודיווחו על שאירע להם. Time and time again throughout the story, the brothers are retelling the story. Over the last 2 weeks, they're retelling the story. We had a brother, he was sold. We had a brother, he's dead. They told the story a number of times. וכפי שכבר נאמר לעיל, בכל מקומות הללו הם בעומדם מול אביהם, הם בעומדם מול האיש אשר בית יוסף, הם בעומדם מול יוסף. הסיפור החדש של סיפור האחים חדר לעומק האמת המסתרת. The story keeps adapting itself to the hidden truth that they don't know of yet. Can you imagine what truth we are moving towards if you take the history of this people, our people over the last 100 years? Can you begin to imagine how every single particle seems to be rotten? If you talk about Kishinev in 1905, if you talk about Kristallnacht, if you talk about the Holocaust, if you talk about terrorism, we have a couple of light bulbs in the middle. But we're in the middle of the story. You can't judge a story in the middle of the story. הסיפור החדש של סיפור האחים חדר לעומק האמת הניסית עוד יותר מאשר התרחשות הגלויה כעת, אוחז יוסף גם הוא במידה זה ומעשה הסיפור חדש למוראות. Yosef is now suggesting a totally new story, a new way to look at it. What did I call this share? Perspective. How is an event defined? It's defined by you. You define an event. The fact is, we could all have the exact same experience and describe it totally differently. Over the page now to Rabbi Sachs. Viktor Frankl, we're joining Rabbi Sachs in the middle of an essay, okay? You know who Viktor Frankl is. Man's Search for Meaning. If you're going to Poland, and if you're not going to Poland, it's a very important little book with an enormous amount of wisdom to read. Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl was in Auschwitz. He was a psychologist, and he wrote a little book which has so much truth. Do a course on his book. Victor, my wife bought it for my son for Hanukkah. She gave it to him in the morning and he finished it by the afternoon. He just read it right through. This is my Harry Potter son who listens to Shiur Klali. Only child who listens to Shiur Klali every week. Not live, but so Viktor Frankl, we're meeting in the middle. He's quoted as Rabbi Sachs is often doing. He quotes a lot of sources, but I just wanted the Viktor Frankl piece. Something peculiar happened to me because I prepared this year on Thursday last week, and on Shabbos I'm reading Viktor Frankl, Lo Kashur. And then I forgot that Rabbi Sachs quoted Viktor Frankl, and I was quoting Rabbi Sachs. And then I brought Viktor Frankl to school. It's in my bag. I said, I'm going to quote you a piece of Viktor Frankl at the end. And then I realized that Rabbi Sachs quotes it anyway. So I don't need to. That's senility. You know, when you totally forget a source you put in and you're about to put it in twice within 2 meters of each other. You're far away from that area of life. As am I, at only 25 after all. Viktor Frankl, הראה כי יש דרך אחרת, והוא עשה זאת בתנאים האיומים ביותר שבני אדם חוו אי פעם. So Viktor Frankl is going to manage these two essays fit together beautifully. במחנה Auschwitz, in Auschwitz, לפני השואה היה פרנקל psychotherapist, he was a psychotherapist. You see the Hebrew there is pretty easy. שהתמחה בריפוי בעלי נטיות אובדניות. He used to deal with people who were suicidal. That was his work. He used to deal with people who were suicidal. But Auschwitz, in Auschwitz, he decided to work in the following area while he was a prisoner, of course. He wanted to impart within his friends, his colleagues who were prisoners in Auschwitz, the will to live, which was very rare in Auschwitz. Right? People lost the will to live very, very quickly. He was aware that only if they could keep this will to live would they last. Now this is a quote from Viktor Frankl. Those of us, listen, those of us who lived in a concentration camp זוכרים את האנשים אשר היו עוברים מצריף לצריף כדי לעודד רוחם של אחרים. We remember the people, there were people who used to go from barracks to barracks to encourage people to live. כדי לפרוס להם מפרוסת לחמם, to give them a piece of bread. It's an incredibly courageous thing to do. אולי הם היו מעטים, maybe there were few people, אך די בהם להוכיח כי אפשר ליטול מן האדם את הכל, חוץ מדבר אחד. But they understood one thing, you can take everything from a human being. You can take everything from a human being except for one thing. את האחרונה שבחירויותו אנוש, לבחור את עמדתו במערכת נסיבות מסוימות, לבור את דרכו. You can take everything from a person except for his choice of how to live. Girls, if you're talking, you're not listening to me. It's not possible. מה שנתן לאנשים את הרצון לקרות הוא אמונתם שיש להם סימן לנצח. What enables people to live is the knowledge that they have something to do in life, that they have a mission to accomplish in life, that God created me for a reason. שליחות למלא, that I have a שליחות to fulfill. הדבר מה חשוב שהם עדיין לא השלימו, something that's important that they haven't yet done. והשם מחכה להם שיעשו בעתיד, and it's waiting for them when they get out of here. צריכים היינו ללמוד בעצמנו ללמד את האנשים המיואשים. We have to teach ourselves, says Frank, and we have to teach other people, כי בעצם לא הייתה חשיבות למה שאנחנו קיווינו לכל החיים, אלא למה שביקשו החיים לקבל מאיתנו. Listen to this sentence. It's not important what we expect of life, it's what life expects of us. Listen! Important words. They're important, they're not my words. They're important words. It's not important what I expect of life, it's what life expects of me. I've been created for a person, for a reason. Again, read it. לא הייתה חשיבות למה שאנחנו קיווינו לקבל מן החיים. It's not important what we want to get from life. אלא למה שביקשו החיים לקבל מאיתנו. It's what life wants to get from us. פרנקו נטע בעשירים את ההכרה שהעתיד שלהם קורא להם בכך, הצליח לעזור להם בעודם בגייס המוות לגלות את יהודם בחיים. He said, there's a reason for you to be alive. You were created for a purpose. This was as true then, there, as it is in this room now. There is a reason we exist. It's not the phone, it's not the computer. There's a reason that every single person in this room exists. השינוי המנטלי שחבר אנשים אלה ידוע כיום, בעיקר בקרב אנשי הטיפול הקוגניטיבי-התנהגותי, כי מסגור מחדש is called a new framework. The picture is the same, but you change the frame of the picture. מסגור חדש. That's exactly what Yosef did. It's the same story. You ever done that? Girls, it's upsetting me. It's disturbing me and upsetting me. You've got a picture. I'm sure your parents have done this at home. And there's a frame to the picture. And your parents change the frame. And the picture changes. If you've ever had an expensive picture painting, you would know that choosing the frame is a fundamental part of what the picture is. It can change how the picture looks. And this is apparently a psychological concept. Mizgor mechadash, a new framework. That's exactly what Yosef does. That's exactly what Viktor Frankl did in Auschwitz. He told people, you're suffering now, but don't look now, look ahead. Look to where you're going to be because of this. Look to where you're going to go as a result of this. השינוי המנטלי שחוו אנשים אלה ידוע כיום בעיקר בקרב אנשי הטיפול קוגניטיבי-התנהגותי כמסגור מחדש, a new frame, תמונה של סייע עשויה להיראות אחרת כאשר מחליפים את המסגרת שלה. A picture of an artist will change when you change the frame. וכמו התמונה גם החיים, and like the picture, so is life. העובדות אינן משתנות, the facts don't change. אך משתנה האופן שאנו תופסים בה. But the way that we perceive them changes. Frankl כותב שהוא הצליח לשרוד באושוויץ. Frankl himself writes, and this is what I was going to quote, but it's here anyway. He managed to survive in Auschwitz על ידי כך שבכל יום ויום דמיין את עצמו מרצה באוניברסיטה על פסיכולוגיה של מחנה הריכוז. He envisaged every single day himself after the Holocaust teaching his psychological theories that he developed in the concentration camp. כל מה שקרה לה בהווה הוטמע, everything that was happening to him in the present was exchanged. באמצעות פעולה התודעית זאת, כדי להמחשה של הרעיונות שיסביר בהרצאה. בדרך זו הצלחתי איכשהו להתעלות על המצב. In that way I was able somehow to get the better of the reality facing me. It is how I define what's happening. That's exactly what Yosef has done. Mizkor Mechadash. He has totally redefined the whole event. They're the same events, but he's redefined them. Imagine, ladies, if we could do that. Imagine. You can't always do it in the middle of the painting. When the painting is finished, to be able to למסגר מחדש, תגלית מודרנית זוהי בעצם תגלית מחודשת, מפני שהראשון גדולי המסגרים מחדש בישראל הוא יוסף. And so here Rabbi Sachs says that the first person ever to do this was Yosef. כמתואר בפרשות השבוע הזה והשבוע הבא, כזכור יוסף נקרא לעבודה בידי אחיו. He was sold by his brothers, who איבד את חירותו, he lost his freedom for 13 years, והוא מנותק ממשפחתו למשך 20 שנה. He's cut off from his family for 20 years. אילו נותר לאחיו טינה להשתוקק במקום בהם, היה אפשר להבין אותו. If he had a feeling of revenge, a grudge to bear on his brothers, we would accept that, we would understand that. ובכל זאת הוא מתרומם מעל לרגשות הללו, but he overcomes this, he's able to overcome this. ועשה זאת באמצעות הכנסת הזיכרונות למסגרת חדשה. What does he do? He simply gets a new frame for the picture. אני יוסף אחיכם, he quotes exactly the same psukim we quoted at the beginning. והנה, דבריו אל אחיו כעבור שנים, לאחר שכמובן נפטר, הם פחדו שיוסף שמע למעשה את נקמתו. And his last words to the brothers, after Yaakov has died, final picture, אל תראו כי עתך את אלוהים עליהם. Don't fear me, because am I in the place of God? ואתם חשבתם עליי רעה, you thought to do me bad, but God thought אחרת. Yosef, he's not interested in the Kama. He's not interested in avenging himself. Because God had a plan. That's the way I look at it. That's the way I choose to look at it. So God had a plan. When my friend was killed 8 years ago in a terrorist attack, I remember at the funeral, his brother, he said something that was redefining. He died at the age of 48, and his brother simply said the following sentence: you were destined to die at the age of 48. As opposed to you were taken from early. He just said you were destined to die at the age of 48. From the day you were born, you were destined to die at the age of 48. We didn't know you were going to die this way. We preferred you to die in a different way, but it was destined to happen. In that moment, in that sentence, he redefined everything that we'd all been experiencing over those last few days. We've been experiencing a terrorist attack, something that came out of nowhere that shouldn't have happened, and so on. And suddenly the brother said, well, it happened, but it was always meant to happen. And suddenly there's a new frame on the picture. It doesn't remove, God forbid, the responsibility from evil people, as the story of Yosef doesn't remove responsibility from the brothers. But it's the way to look at it going forward. You cannot go forward by looking in the past. What is a transgression called, ladies? In Hebrew, a sin is called an avera. Fundamental to sin is living in the past. Avar. To be caught up in the past, to be caught up in something that happened and has finished already and needs to be reviewed, reframed, and moved forward. Avera is someone who lives in the past. Lot's wife is told, do not look back. When she looks back, she turns into a pillar of salt. Metaphorically speaking, I could suggest that salt is a dead mineral. People who look back in their lives, people who spend their lives looking back, are losing their lives. You can't look back. You have to be able to see what's happening now see the issue that is at hand now, and move forward. Yosef Nizgeh Kol Avaro Michadash. He redefines his entire past. Hu lo ra'a od et atzmo ka'adam she'achiv asu lo avel. He doesn't look at himself as I've been oppressed. There was someone, Lahavdil Elef Havdalot, who did this in our generation. My generation. There was a man who was imprisoned in South Africa 50 years ago for 30 years. He spent 30 years in jail. And there was a change. There was a change in the system in South Africa, and he was released from jail. His name was Nelson Mandela. When he came out of jail in South Africa, I don't know whether you remember this, Sydney. You probably don't remember this. When he came out of jail, people were worried that there would be such a bloodbath in South Africa that he would use the power of the African masses to attack the white people, and he didn't do that. He came out of jail after 27 years in jail, I think, and forgave and moved forward. Superhuman. It was incredible zechut to watch such a thing. But it actually happened. Google it. Nelson Mandela came out of jail. Everything could have been very, very different. But he simply forgave and moved forward. An act of Yosef. Mizgor mechadash. He saw something from anew. I want to relate to one final thing here. I want to relate once again to what I said before, this ET question, why didn't Yosef phone home? There are lots of suggestions. The most troubling of the suggestions, challenging of the suggestions, is the Ramban, who says that Yosef did all of this planning with his brothers, all of this manipulation, in order to see his dreams come true. And many of the Mefarshim, including the Abarbanel, get very upset with the Ramban. How dare Yosef manipulate people's lives just so that he can see his dreams coming true. But there's something else I want to relate to here. I want to tell you what this H. Kodesh says in November 1939. You haven't had much of H. Kodesh with Rabbi Weiss, unfortunately, so I don't know whether you saw this. He was in the army already in Parashat Vayishlach. In Parashat Vayishlach, there is a battle that takes place between Yaakov and an angel, Sarosh Shel Esav. And Yaakov, whatever that battle means, right? Because I don't know how you fight an angel. It led the Rambam to believe that this was a nevuah and it didn't really happen, but everyone else says it did. Yaakov is struggling with the angel. And then the angel says to Yaakov, as the sun is coming up, let me go. And Yaakov says to the angel, Lo ashalechecha ki im berechtani, I will not let you go unless you give me a bracha. That's what he says. Lo ashalechecha ki im berechtani. I've told you this before, but in this context. And the Pietzezner Rebbe says as follows. Look at the Pietzezner Rebbe. ונבין למה היה צריך יעקב אבינו ששרו של עשיו יברכו. Why does he need a bracha from שרו של עשיו? אבל מעשה אבות סימן הבנים, ואחר שנפגש עם המלאך ויאבק עמו וגם נגע בכף יריחו, ועשה המלאך ללכת. The malach wants to go, the war's over. So Yaakov says, you're not going, אלא אם כן כי ברכתני, unless you bless me. The Pietzezner says as follows, understand the Pietzezner, November 1939, Warsaw, no ghetto yet. But he's lost his son, he's lost his daughter-in-law, he's lost his sister-in-law, he's on his own. Ki im berechtani. Yaakov says to Sarosh Shel Esav, this isn't over. If you think this finishes and we're going back to where it was before, it cannot be. Lo ashalechecha ki im berechtani. The Pietzezner Rebbe says, he's turning to God, he says there's no way after what we're going through that after this we're going back to Warsaw. Something better has to come out of this. Something more important has to come out. Lo ashalechecha ki im berechtani. I'm not letting you go unless I know that after all of this it's going to be better. It's going to be better than it was. Not that we go back to the way it was before. And this is such an important statement. The Pietzezner is saying the same. We're not going through this and going back to where it was before. And the Poland of 1939 that banned shchita, that closed mikvahs, nothing to do with the Germans. Banned shchita, closed mikvahs. That was Poland in 1939. Fundamental anti-Semitism, Catholic anti-Semitism, Says we're not going back to that. So why did Yosef do this? I want to connect the two. Why did Yosef go through this whole process? Why it takes so much measure to see whether the brothers had changed with Shimon, with Binyamin? There's no way, says Yosef, that we can reunite artificially. I'm not going back to the way it was before. I will not reveal myself to you unless I know it's going to be different. There's no point in a reunification if we're going back to what it was before. I want you to know something. I talk every day. I send a message out to girls who live in Israel and our girls who live in Israel. After all of this is over, and at some stage it will be over, Ezrat Hashem, there's no way we can go back to the way it was before. There's no way we can go back to fighting each other and pointing fingers at each other. There has to be a humongous effort of bringing people back together again. They're fighting shoulder to shoulder in Gaza, and no one's asking who's Sfardi and who's Ashkenazi, who wears a kippah and who doesn't wear a kippah. They're just fighting together. And when we come out of that, there's no way we can go back to the way it was. The Mizgur Chadash, the framework, the new framework is a totally new framework. Things happen for certain reasons, we don't know why they happen, but once they happen, we have to change the entire scenery. We have to change the framework. I want to tell you something. This is one of the most exciting pieces of Torah I ever heard, and every time I tell it, my hairs go on and see already in anticipation. We have this mitzvah on Pesach night. Listen very carefully. We have this mitzvah. You'll never hear a better definition of karpas ever in your life. We have at the beginning of Seder night, we have karpas. If you're from England, you might have parsley. You never have parsley, but on that night you have parsley. You didn't even know what parsley was until they put it on the table and called it karpas. If you're an American, you probably have a potato. And if you're from the Gush, you have a banana to prove to everyone that you know you say Borei Pri Hadama on a banana. And it's a tiny piece of food, right? According to most people who don't have a kazayit. And this is what you're going to eat for the next 3 hours, depending on how annoying your brother's going to be or your dad's going to be and how many questions are going to be asked and so on and so forth. And everyone's just trying to steal another piece of potato. And the Gemara asks a question, why do we have karpas? And the Gemara answers in Pesachim, so the kids will ask a question. So I want to tell you something, honestly, as someone who's done many Sedarim at home. We have karpas every year. So my kids don't ask anymore. If I stand up here in the middle of Seder night and start going, God save our gracious Queen King, and if I do that, then my kids will turn around and say to me, Abba, why are you saying that? And I'll say, because we were slaves in Egypt and we came out and I go to bed. I've been young, so the mitzvah go to bed. But we have a piece of potato every year because my wife's family's from America, so we do the potato bit. We have a piece of potato every year, and they don't ask questions anymore. It's not enough. What the Gemara says isn't enough. Why do we have karpas at the beginning? So the kids will ask, but they don't ask anymore. So why do we have karpas at the beginning of the Seder? Ladies, listen so carefully. Listen carefully. Karpas comes up once. It's called karpas whatever, right? It's not called tapuach hadama or parsley. I used to think karpas was parsley, but it isn't. Karpas is karpas. And parsley is parsley. It's not. What's parsley in Hebrew? What's parsley in Hebrew? I don't even know what it is in Hebrew. I'm not really a vegetable person. Petrozelia. So it's not even called karpas. So why is it called karpas? Ladies, listen, just follow me. 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes. No bathrooms, nothing. Just 5 more minutes. It's called karpas. There's one place in the entire Tanakh where the word karpas comes up. Megillat Esther. Chor karpas techelet v'argaman. In the first perek of Megillat Esther, karpas is a type of cloth. Now listen to this. Like, you're not going out tonight after you hear this. You're not going out. You're not going to be able to eat. You know, I can't eat. Oh my God. Oh my God. You just get that. Oh my word. I can't wait for pizza. I got to send something. You write it carefully. It's from my rabbi. Rabbi Bersi said like this. On the words coat of many colors, ketonet pasim, you look at Rashi. Rashi says the ketonet pasim was made of a cloth called karpas. At the beginning of the Seder night, we dip karpas in salt water. Before we suggest how we came out of Egypt, a Jew should never forget how we went down there. Because Jews sold Jews, because they dipped his coat in blood. At the beginning of that's karpas, my God, isn't that good? Isn't that good? Ladies, there's nothing can make you happier than Torah. Isn't that good? Isn't that good? You did the karpas at the beginning of Seder. You did the karpas at the beginning of Seder to remember how the brothers dipped Yosef's coat in blood. Before a Jew remembers how he came out of Galut, before we remember how we got into this mess, we have to remember it was our own fault. It's always our own fault. It's always our own fault. Not being one is the only thing that destroys the Jewish people, not Iran, and not Hamas, klum. Not Hezbollah, klum. We fought the Romans. We fought the Greeks. We fought the Germans. When the French, we lasted longer in the War-Soviet uprising. The French lasted when they attacked France. It's ourselves. It's ourselves. Not echad bilvad. Not being one. That's the only thing. She'amad aleinu l'chalotenu. And so what do we do immediately after we did the karpas? We say the most strange prayer. Halach ma'anya. Why? It's like an Aramaic prayer. It's got nothing to be. What do we say? Everyone who wants to come into my house, come in. And next year we'll be in Jerusalem. We pose the problem, we give the answer. The problem is that we can't get on with each other. The answer is open up your doors and invite people in. And then next year we'll be in Jerusalem. That is a solution. We have to be able, not yet because this story isn't over, but we have to be able, when this story is over, to put a new framework. We've seen the most unbelievable things of togetherness and unity. I envy my sons, not just because they're fighting and I really would like to fight, not just because they're in an Israeli army uniform and I would like to be in that uniform, not just because they're Maccabim, but because they are fighting shoulder to shoulder with people they've never spoken to before, with people who they have nothing in common except for the fact that they are Jews and we are Jews. That is a new framework we have to build. There is no way that we can go back to the way it was before. There's no way. We have to learn how to make a new framework, how to redefine. And ladies, we have to be able to do that in our lives. Because our happiness, your individual happiness, my individual happiness, is defined by the way we choose to look at what's happening to us. The way we choose to define it. And we've got every opportunity to make ourselves upset and depressed. But Yosef is what a mentor of Mizgor Mechadash, to be able to look at something and turn it around. He's just taken the frame off the picture and put a different frame on, and he has reinvented an entire process. We have to be able to do the same, not just nationally, but most importantly, I speak to myself as much as I speak to you, to be able to look at things differently. I see it every day. I see a girl who spills a piece of coffee and she has to rest up in her room and speak to her mashgicha, because she got a stain on her favorite dress, and it's the only dress in the world that she got from Bloomingdale's or whatever, and she's going, she needs to see someone and she has to speak to someone about it, just and the other girl spills the coffee on her dress, she just laughs it off. So who's happy? They both spilled coffee on their dress. They both totally interpreted the matter in a different way. It's perspectives, it's our entire perspective. And that enabled Joseph to go through everything he went through. It was that perspective to be able to, reframe a picture, to be able to look at something and say, okay. And I think we have to do that. And we have to learn from this story. And Yosef there's one thing that he will not let go of. He will not give up on. And that's why I believe that's why he forced them through the process to see that they were prepared to give their lives for Shimon, they were prepared to give their lives for Binyamin. He has to know that if we are going to hug each other, if we're going to embrace each other, it has to be real. It can't be a superficial handshake. It has to be real. I'm not going back to what it was. I'm not going back to the way it was before. It has to be better. I don't know what we're going to do, but we have to do something. I personally have ideas in my mind of what I want to do, but there has to be a way that Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, in a metaphorical sense, reconnect. That people reconnect with each other. That people come together with each other. And our people, if we can fight together, we can live in peace together as well. And these moments are very, very valuable and important moments. Moments of incredible gevurah and gedula. The moments that have to be then taken back into the regular routine of our lives. There's an important message, two important messages. Number one, to know how to look at things properly, to know how to understand what's happening in front of us. One of the problems that we all face I started at 5 minutes late, so I'll give myself 2 of those 5 minutes and you'll get 3 minutes off, okay? The way in which we choose to define what we are and who we are, we have such a disadvantage because everything's so quick, because everything comes up on the screen so quickly, we're not thinking. I'll give you one word here, ladies. You're on the eve of an MTA Mesivat Shiur. I happened to hear a lovely song as I was standing outside. It's nice. It's not done every year. You should know. It's not done every year. Girls don't always write a song for the MTA, so it's very nice. More than nice. This should be a wake-up call for people who are wasting their time. This should be a wake-up call. You're going to see people standing here on Wednesday night. Almost every one of them has fulfilled their year from beginning to end. And for us, in the middle of our year, it's a wake-up call. There's no point being here if you're wasting your time. There's just no point. You're wasting your parents' money, and you're wasting your life. If you want to stay in bed all day, more comfortable at home. You're doing so well, but now it's time to, you've got 6 weeks now, it's just you. The school student body has reduced itself by 20%. Less people in class, you've already noticed today, and it's an opportunity. And by the time the next MTA comes, you will be the veterans. You'll be after Poland, after Zemino. You'll be in the last third of your year. This is the middle of the year. It's in your hands, how you want to define it. And I can tell you as well, in the context of this shiur, there are plenty of girls that will be here on Wednesday night and stand here, that it wasn't plain sailing from day one. It didn't always work out. But the picture is defined by where they are now. I'm very, very proud of what they've done. I remember, as I told Shiur earlier, I remember some of these girls when I interviewed them. And they've done it, they've taken it, and they spent their time. You've seen them. They have been a great model for you in a baby midrash. And you've seen them. And they haven't got rid of their phones totally, but you've seen them learning, and you've seen them more in the baby midrash than not. So the only reason to be here is to develop yourself and to take yourself further. We have to cut through the surface here. It's not just a year in Israel where we eat pizza, we eat out, we just have a good time. There's so much more of an opportunity here. And we started great. Like I wrote you a few weeks ago, my job is to push for excellence and is to get the best out of you. And that's my job, you know. It's still my job, even though I don't do what Dr. Yochai does anymore, but it's still my job to make sure that you're doing everything that you can do. And that's what you want to do. Because if you're not doing that, you and I know that it's not high school. This is about self-motivation. This is about you. This is about where you want to go, what you want to do. You don't have to be here. You choose to be here. If you choose to be here, make it work. Make it work. You know, we've had enough disturbances this year that against all odds, we're still where we are and we're doing well. But now we have to put our foot on the accelerator and use the time, because the time simply flies. By the time the next decade comes, you'll be on the last third of your year, nearly over. And I can tell you just from experience, the year just flies by. You think, what are you talking about? It's just Hanukkah or whatever. It's not true. It's not true. You're here for a reason, and focus and move. And I have every confidence that that's what you can do, and that you can fulfill. And I have every confidence that myself can facilitate that. But we need to keep up with the motivation. Have a good evening.